negative entities and fatigue. So if you remember, negative entities attach to soul injuries, into your energetic field, and they can drain your energy and affect you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. In this specific example, they can cause fatigue that's going to mirror a lot of your other physical healing symptoms. So it can feel like adrenal fatigue, it can feel like neurological fatigue, it can feel like a viral flare in your body that's causing fatigue. It can also feel like emotional rooted fatigue, like stress and exhaustion from a lot of emotions or blocked emotions in your body. I'm going to give you a great example of this. So recently I was walking my dog. I was in the park. I started feeling an intense fatigue just in my knees. It felt very viral, very acidic. I had experienced this fatigue before. So I was curious. So because I do a lot of inner work and shadow work, I just brought my consciousness down to check out what was going on, see if I could move the energy. And immediately the energy ran. It went up my right leg and out my right hip. My right hip popped when it popped out. So this was a negative reptilian, and it ran as soon as I saw it, because I would have taken care of it and sent it back to source otherwise. So, and in this case, it was causing a very similar viral flare fatigue symptom in my knees that also felt like neurological fatigue. Negative entities were causing my client adrenal fatigue, and it healed after we removed the negative entity attachments. In my last reel, I talked about how negative entities can create symptoms that mimic neurological fatigue, adrenal fatigue, viral flare fatigue. And this is because they attach to our energy body and they can drain our light and cause all kinds of symptoms like fatigue. It can be localized or it can be all over your body. Now, in this case, this client came to me after 2 years of being on medical medium protocols, really struggling with her adrenal fatigue to the point where she had to eat her adrenal snacks every 15 minutes. She did not understand why this symptom was not healing or shifting. Now, I'm not saying she didn't have any adrenal fatigue, because most people have a certain degree of adrenal fatigue, but for most people, it also starts to heal after many months or even a couple years into their healing journey. This symptom should have started healing. So in this session, we removed several negative entity attachments, including a very large full body negative reptilian that had 2 heads. First time I've seen that. And after the session, she reported that the adrenal fatigue was completely gone even days after the session. So it pointed to a need to do deeper energetic healing for the specific symptom. So if your symptoms aren't healing, look deeper. A negative entity was attached to my client, cloaked as AW himself. Now, this is a funny story, but it has a lot of important lessons for us. So Anthony William, in his old website, he talks about the sea of confusion. So in these shadow realms, spiritual realms, there is light and darkness, and there are a lot of dark beings that will masquerade as light beings. And unless you've built your discernment, it's going to be hard to learn to read these energies. Now, they can also attach and mess with you in your shadow realms, your shadow consciousness, on your unhealed parts, and trick those parts by masquerading as energies that you trust. So in this case, this negative entity was masquerading as AW because this client follows medical medium protocols, trusts AW, and was messing with her psychic abilities. Now, when I saw it, it looked like a little AW flying around, and I know that AW, and nor should anybody else, and I love you AW, should not be attached to anybody, including anybody's third eye. You are a sovereign being. So I knew that there was something going on here, and when I caught the negative entity, its cloak came off, so it had cloaked itself as AW because it wanted to stay. And then I removed it. I saw it was a negative reptilian, so it was also trying to trick me, right? So it's really important to build your discernment, do your shadow work, and understand that these negative beings will show up as people you trust. Negative entity attachments while healing with medical medium protocols that cause pain in your body because you're cleansing. This is really important to understand because it is common, and it happens to a lot of my clients, actually. It happens to me quite often. So when you're cleansing with medical medium protocols and you're releasing toxins out of your body, killing off pathogens, releasing old emotional wounds, physically or energetically, those negative entities that were attached to those things, toxins or emotional wounds, soul injuries that were stored in your body, can come to the surface. They were hidden underneath, now they're to the surface. And they can get angry and aggravated and cause a lot of pain in your body. And they don't automatically just release because you're cleansing. I have a great example. Last week, a client came to me for an energy healing session, a golden alchemy healing session, and she had a lot of pain in her left arm from her shoulder down to the point where she was not sleeping at night. So it was pretty severe. On a scale of 0 to 10 in that session, 10 being highest, the pain started at a 7. And by the time I was done, it was a 3. And in that session, I released probably about 300 attachments that were sitting right on her nerves, causing a lot of pain and other kind of emotional, energetic blockages. So always look deeper if you have symptoms coming up that aren't healing with medical medium protocols. Negative entity attachments that come to the surface while you're healing with medical medium protocols and cause pain in your body. I want to go a little bit deeper into this topic. I already did a reel about a client. This one is going to be about me. I've been doing medical medium protocols for 7 years, and 4 years ago I started doing a lot of inner work, shadow work, energy healing, because I realized I had a negative entity issue that was disrupting my life and stopping my ability to heal. And know that some of you are going to be like this. Now, first of all, everybody has negative entity attachments, but not everybody is going to be attacked by them at this level. And when you start cleansing, you can push them to the surface and they can get more aggressive and attack you physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And for me, I'm very sensitive to them, and so I have to deal with them because they disrupt my life and they stop my ability to fully heal my symptoms. Now, I recently had a bone spur in my left foot that formed about 4 years ago that started healing over the summer and went into 3 cycles of healing. And on the 3rd cycle of healing, when it healed almost completely, I intuitively felt like some negative entities came to the surface and they were presenting as a lot of pain in my left foot and left leg. Now, some of that pain was physical, but it was mostly energetic. And the reason I know that is when the negative entities that came to the surface were cleared, the pain essentially went away. A negative entity was attached to her eyeball and was stopping her ability to heal her eye and cleanse it fully while doing medical medium protocols. Now, this is kind of a crazy story, but it's true and it happens to a lot of my clients. When you release negative entity attachments, you can start healing faster, cleansing faster, because they can slow your process down physically and energetically. They create lots of problems in people's fields. So this client bought a shadow work session package with me, 3-session package. In her 2nd session, she found a negative reptilian attached to her eye. And we removed that reptilian. I taught her how to do it. It was her first time ever removing a negative entity, and she's continued to do it since then. And when she removed that and was able to receive healing into that eye, within a few hours, she started detoxing pretty intensely through that eye. I've seen this with other clients. And she told me that several years before, she had been diagnosed with some dermatitis in her eye, and the doctor at that time had given her steroid cream to put over her eyelid. And my guides told me that through that steroid cream, a negative entity had actually attached to her eyeball. And when we removed that negative entity, her body was able to go in and start healing and cleansing that out. And yeah, it accelerated her healing. My client was as attached to her negative entity attachment as it was attached to her. This is pretty mind-blowing and really important to understand if you are on a greater healing journey. Now, this person came to me for a shadow work session series. This is her 2nd shadow work session. And in her session, 2nd session, she saw a negative entity pretty soon into the session. Now, this negative entity couldn't just be removed. It would not go. It was running around her body, shape-shifting, doing naughty things. So I knew there was more to the story. So I started asking questions to my client, to the negative entity, to understand what the story was. And what came out in the session was that my client had had a period in her life where she felt very alone, very separate from God, and had this unmet need, and she needed a friend. And then shows up a negative entity who's also looking for a friend, and it attached to her. So in the session, the negative entity was sometimes being very naughty, sometimes being very sweet and loving, and she had an emotional attachment to it. So I told her she needed to unravel and heal the aspects of herself that were attached to this negative entity, and when that was healed, the negative entity would release, and that's exactly what happened. Negative entity attachments can bleed through from parallel timelines and affect you in the here and now. This is crazy. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think of it, because parallel timelines are as real as this timeline that you're in now. I'm going to give you a great example of how I came upon this. I was teaching one of my clients how to learn energy healing, like a basic form of energy healing, and I was giving her a demonstration, and I asked if I had anything to clear. My guide said yes. I asked him what it was. They said it was a negative entity. I was asking what timelines it was coming from, past, ancestral, and I got it was actually coming in from a parallel timeline. It was a reptilian attachment. I released the attachment, and it was so dramatic, the releasing. I felt it come off my back, and my body jerked and moved. And so that parallel version of me was actually bleeding into this reality. And the reason it was doing that in this case was that version needed help. That version needed healing. It also healed me by doing that, because that negative entity was bleeding through into my timeline here and now. My client had a negative entity attached to her that was also attached to thousands of other people. Now, I've told you guys that negative entities can do this, and this is a really great example of what negative entities can do at a collective level. So in this case, this was a shadow work session, my client's third shadow work session. And in that session, we found two artificial energies within her energy field that had been merged with her field over two different past lives. And these were part of a plan to integrate her into an artificial type of intelligence system, which a lot of people have issues like this. And they were affecting her in reincarnations because they were attached to her. Removing these attachments was a huge healing for her soul. And when we removed the second layer of this attachment that was in her thigh, beneath that were four negative entities that were attached, that had been part of attaching these artificial energies to her. Three of them agreed to leave right away. They were very apologetic, and the fourth one did not want to go. He was being kind of a jerk. And so once we talked to him and helped him understand why it wasn't his highest healing to leave and go back to source to have his own healing, he then showed us that he was also attached to thousands of others. All those people had this negative entity removed, and they all received a healing. So this was a huge session. My client's psychosis had caused hundreds of negative entities to be attached to her field. Now, this client came to me for an angelic soul alignment healing session. She'd had the psychosis years and years before, had been in and out of mental health institutions. During that time, she'd been hearing a lot of voices, voices trying to tell her to do things and talking to her. She started medical medium protocols and healed the mental health issues around this. So she healed the psychosis that was caused by the toxic heavy metals that was triggered by a stress in her life. But what hadn't healed was all the attachments the psychosis had caused. So when I was doing the healing, the angels explained that when she'd had the psychosis, it had just ripped her field open. It had caused such a huge soul injury to her that had ripped her field open, and she was actually living in multiple dimensions at the same time. And when that happened, all these disembodied souls, the souls who had not crossed over, came to her because they could see she was in this state. They could see that her field was ripped open, and they started attaching to her or even just hanging out in her field. And what the angels explained to me, that they had merged so deep within her, she would have sometimes been feeling or thinking their things, not only during the psychosis, but also up to present time, up until we removed these attachments. And she had no idea. She was extremely balanced and feeling good in her body at this time. Now, you might wonder why she couldn't connect to and understand that these attachments were there. And I'm going to explain this to you in my next reel, because it's important to understand this. How can somebody have a ton of negative entity attachments and not even know that they're there? So this is more common than you would think. In my last reel, I shared a client example of a healing session we did where we removed a ton of negative entity attachments connected to a psychosis she'd had many years ago that she had healed with medical medium protocols. And she was shocked that the voices that she had heard were still actually attached to her. She just wasn't hearing them anymore because she had shifted her vibration, her dimension that she was mostly embodied in. So the reason that this person or most people wouldn't be aware of is because they haven't done work around their consciousness, expanding their consciousness. And that's a journey and a process. So first of all, we've been lied to about what consciousness is, that there's a spiritual world out there and there's a real war out there between the light and the dark, and dark energies, dark entities are looking to feed off of light. So if you're not fully sovereign and aware of your field, it's very easy for these things to become attached to you because your unconscious parts are allowing them in. Okay, so as you start expanding your consciousness, doing shadow work, getting into your body more, connecting to your energy bodies, you're going to find many, many, many layers in your energy field that are energies from you, like traumas you've had, soul injuries that need to be healed, or they can be other energies that are attached in your field. And it just takes time to work through this. And as you do this work, you become more and more aware of how the energy field actually works, how the spiritual world actually works. And it takes time to adjust to this new level of awareness. And I am 4 years into this part of my journey, and I am still finding negative entities attached to me. And I'm going to share some examples of this in my next reels. I had a craving for junk food that came from a soul fracture attached to me. That was my dad's sister's soul fracture. She died a long time ago. I'm going to explain to you the story and talk about cravings through this. So I've been healing with medical medium protocols for over 7 years. When I started, I understood that cravings could be connected to physical things, including pathogens craving the foods that they desired, or deficiencies in my body and me not consciously being able to connect to what that craving for something rich in glucose actually meant in terms of what's actually healthy for my body. But as you're healing and continuing on your healing journey, you will find as you heal those physical factors connected to cravings, other things can surface even when you're actually healing the physical factors. Cravings can be rooted in real emotional needs. A lot of us emotionally eat, have done that for over our lifetime. But cravings can also come from emotional wounds. Like if they come out of nowhere, there could be parts of you that are needing some kind of assistance, and it's just they're used to being connected to a food or a craving in your body. Now, this happened to me the other day. I had a very nourishing, fat-free dinner, and after the dinner, I started craving junk food really, really strongly. Now, I've never really been a big junk food person in my life. I've always eaten pretty clean, not medical medium clean until 7 years ago, but I've always eaten pretty clean. And so, because I do a lot of shadow work, I started listening to the craving. It was coming from a band of energy from down my chest, like right below my throat down. And I was listening to this. I immediately knew it was my sister. It wasn't actually me. It was a soul fracture of hers that had attached to me. We didn't have good boundaries when we were kids. It was a lot of trauma. So she had attached to me. And my sister was a huge junk food addict. So this craving all of a sudden made total sense to me. It lost its power when I understood where it was coming from. And then I ensured that she detached from me and went back to source to join her soul, because that's where she belongs. So anyways, interesting story. And yes, soul fractures from other people, even dead people, can be attached to you. So if you're struggling with cravings, sometimes it means you need to look deeper and not just muscle through it. Get conscious about it and understand where it's rooted from, and that makes it so much easier to heal. A negative entity was causing thoughts to continuously loop in my head. Now, I want to get into this further, but I want you to know a lot of people come to me struggling to deal with the thoughts that are happening in their head, the images that they're getting in their head. Now, this can be caused by toxic heavy metals. Medical Medium has written a lot about this. It can be caused by soul injuries, patterns we developed in our childhood, patterns we absorbed from our parents, traumas in our lifetime. But it can also be caused by negative entities. Oftentimes, if it's a really, really hard, stuck symptom or symptoms going on in the mental health field of your healing, it's probably a combination of all three. It's important to address the foundational layer of the physical healing before moving into deeper kind of consciousness work or shadow work, which is what I teach my clients once they've addressed enough of the heavy metals. Now, in this case, I was actually doing shadow work at the time when I noticed there was something going on with my thoughts. I was trying to work on a different part of my body, and my thoughts, like in the front of my brain, they were constantly looping or fixated on one topic, and I didn't know why. I was trying to divert my attention so I could do my shadow work on the focused piece I was working on, but then I realized I need to do shadow work on these thoughts, which you can do shadow work on them. So I tuned in the energy to understand what was the root cause of this thought or this energy of thoughts looping in my head. And immediately I saw a very, very large entity with tentacles that were it was on my forehead, and the tentacles were going into my brain, and it was pushing on different parts of my brain, like electrical activity, and it was causing these energy of thoughts that I didn't even need to have, that weren't even important to me, to continuously loop. And so what I did is I released the negative entity that was attached to it, and the thoughts completely dissolved, did not come back. I didn't even feel them. So in this case, these thoughts were just caused by the negative entity, trying to keep me in a loop, to keep my focus away from my deeper healing. Are you experiencing glitches trying to listen to Anthony Williams' new book on angels, demons, and spiritual tools, or saw glitches on his live that he did on YouTube, Instagram, Rumble the other day? Well, that's because negative entities and demons can affect the internet, the frequencies of the internet. The frequencies that the internet and your Wi-Fi run are really easy for them to access, okay? And when Anthony is presenting this information on a platform like a YouTube or Instagram, and he's presenting it to a lot of people, thousands of people, the negative entities and demons are going to try to stop that information from going out. So that's what you were seeing. Now, if you're experiencing even more glitches, like trying to play the audiobook, or even more glitches trying to play back like the YouTube Live or Instagram Live, it's often a sign that you have a negative entity or demon issue in your field or in your home. It's a really common thing I see in healing sessions. So the angelic soul alignment healing sessions, or the shadow work sessions, where we're removing negative entities and demons from people's fields. It happened in a session yesterday. Somebody has the person I was working with has a really bad negative entity issue. So there was all kinds of glitches. It happened in a session I did last week with somebody else in this community that has a bad negative entity issue. It's happened to me. Okay, because I've been on a big negative entity demon healing journey. So if that is happening to you, check yourself, see if it feels true that there's a negative entity or demon issue around you or in your field, or it might be somebody else around you. And it's important to take care of that. You can try using Anthony's spiritual tools. If that is not enough, then I recommend doing something like an angelic soul alignment healing session with me, or a shadow work session. And you can also write to me and inquire about doing a property clearing. And it's important to take care of this because this is how they show their presence. These are the clues that you need to be paying attention to.